Good evening. Earlier today, I sent you a YouTube video, but unfortunately, when I went to access it again, it said the account was closed, so I had to create a new account, and I should be okay now. So sometimes these technological glitches happen, but I'll definitely be able to cover even more exactly some of the key points. Now, what I'd really like to get into today are some components of our handbook, our textbook, and I'd like to talk a little bit about paragraph writing and essay writing. Now, with a Brief Penguin Handbook, you should definitely keep this book when you're done with college writing. You will use it as a professional, you will use it as a student. There's a number of times where you need a handbook, whether you're writing for school or for work or a nonprofit organization to which you belong. Even they have in our handbook tab number 2, writing for different purposes. They even have tab number 3, writing into disciplines, writing that you would do in different courses or in different majors. They have tab number 4, designing and presenting. And so, if you're designing a visual presentation or other types of presentations, that they get into that. So it's a really good resource to keep. Now, I have a couple of other suggestions as far as for handbooks that you may want to consider. There's one called HOW, which is the Handbook for Office Workers. That one is very good. I obviously always recommend owl.english.purdue.edu, which is the online writing lab at Purdue University. Very consistently, I refer to the site called refdesk.com, which is really good reference information, and I also use www.bartleby.com, and all those are quite good for different types of information. If you ever need statistics, especially from the federal government, there's a really good place called fedstats.gov, and they have all sorts of facts and statistics that you definitely would be able to use. I don't want you to use Wikipedia for this class. It's not a good source. I would much prefer that you go to the WCCC library site. They have EBSCOhost there, which is a very good source, is one of the best in my opinions. They have LexisNexis. They have Opposing Viewpoints, EncyclopediaBritannica.com, and so there's a number of sources. Also, when you go to our library site, there's a web brochure, and they recommend different sites to look at, such as the Internet Public Library, the Librarian's Index to the Internet, and there's a few others that are commented on there. So even instead of using Google in a broader way, go ahead and use the Google directory. So if you type in Google directory, it'll narrow down the focus for you. If you type in Google Scholar, that even narrows it down even more. It's very useful to do, to search for information more narrowly. When you use Google or Yahoo and some of these other big internet sites, what they do is they search for information not based on reliability, but based oftentimes on popularity. And a lot of times on Google or Yahoo, you are going to be getting sources based on how much the company is paying Yahoo or Google to have their sites listed. So some sites that pay more often appear first, and not all the time. Like I said, they're not always the most reliable. So I just wanted to to point that out to you. Even in the tab, when you look in our handbook, there's a tab on researching, and when you look on the researching tab, they give you some different options to look at as far as finding sources and so on. But they go through and they talk about on page 181 the advantages of the database versus web sources. So library databases such as EBSCOhost, LexisNexis, and so on, compared to Yahoo or Google and others, and they do a comparative analysis of those. And I think that that's good to be aware of. Also, too, if you look in here, they show you more specifically on page 183 as how to use EBSCOhost more efficiently and effectively, LexisNexis, and they also show you on 184 and 185 on how to conduct good keyword searches to find information that you're looking for. But essentially on page 189, they talk about finding good, reliable internet information, and on 194, focusing more specifically on more narrowly focusing on Google on 194 and 195. And so good information there that I just wanted to point out to you. Now, if you do have your handbook, I wanted to get into the chapter a little bit on paragraph writing, and I believe that's right around page 30 or so, because I was just looking at that earlier today. Actually, it starts a little bit before that on page 21. It is composed paragraphs, okay? And what they talk about in this section is as far as some different options you have in paragraph writing. And the best thing that you can do is stress your topic sentence at the start of the paragraph, not at the end, because that's your concluding sentence. And again, with your topic sentence, you want to state the topic and your attitude. Let me give you an example. Last night, it snowed 12 inches, which makes me happy since I love to ski. Your attitude about the snow there is one of jubilation. Now, somebody else would say, last night it snowed 12 inches, which makes me upset because I have to take my daughter to Syracuse, New York today. And you can imagine how much snow there would be in Syracuse. So you have to state what your topic is, but also your attitude about that topic. And if you notice, they use different types of writing that they mention as far as process, narration, classification and division, definition, and so on. But the biggest thing that they mention on page 31 is signal relationships with transitional terms. Transitional terms show how one idea goes to the next and to the next. So if you use first, second, next, after, and so on, that information is helpful whether you're writing or whether you're speaking. Transitional terms and transitional phrases are very, very helpful because it allows the reader to understand what happened one after another, and that does make a difference. As I said, I emphasize that pretty consistently in this class. If you look on page 33, consider paragraph length. The one point that I wanted to tell you with paragraph length is try to keep more of your paragraphs in the 6 to 8 sentence parameters. If you want to go shorter than that, that's fine. If for some reason you need to go longer, that's okay. But what I wanted to tell you is if you can use more shorter paragraphs or paragraphs that are more readable, it helps. If you have one long paragraph over a page, it makes it much, much more difficult to read and much more difficult to digest. So that's what you really need to consider. Now, the other point is with sentences. When you see a sentence go over 3 or more type lines, take your mouse and highlight the sentence and see how many words it is. Typically, once a sentence goes over about 25 words, I like to keep a lot of sentences to 20 words or so. When it starts to get to 30, 40, or 50 words, even if the sentence is grammatically correct, it becomes very difficult to read and understand. So I just want to convey that to you. It's just a simple eyeball test to proofread through and pick up these longer sentences to be aware of that. And when you write your paragraphs, use good supporting details. So if you're writing a paragraph to say that you love to ski with these 12 inches of snow, then I go to Seven Springs, I ski from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, I don't take a break, I enjoy it, and then you have your concluding sentence about what an exhilarating day it was. Everybody has things that they really like or enjoy, and for somebody that likes to ski, that would be the most ideal day for them. And so their topic sentence, their supporting detail, and their concluding sentence all would support, those key points. And if you look further on page 37 about rewrite, edit, and proofread, they give you some suggestions as far as in proofreading and editing your documents. And on 44, they talk about proofreading carefully. If you can, wait a day before you submit an assignment, and that way you can print it off in the morning and take a look at it and see if you're on target or not. Or better yet, have somebody else look at it, because sometimes your eyes become mesmerized with what you're writing, and sometimes you miss key points. Believe me, that happens all the time. So that's just a suggestion that I have for you, and hopefully, it will be useful. When you go to Chapter 7 or Tab 7 on Effective Style and Language, they talk about using power or using active voice in writing, being specific. If you can, one of these days here soon, just skim from pages 359 to 392. Your word choice in writing or speaking does make a very big difference. And what I wanted to convey to you, though, is, you want to, unless you're using dialogue, in dialogue, spoken language, you can basically say what the person says. But avoid using slang. Slang would be like kids, partying, hanging out, and so on. You want to avoid cliches like pedal to the metal. Try to avoid using jargon unless you can explain it. And jargon would be as far as, the patient had to be intubated. What does that mean? Or the person had a myocardial infarction. You need to explain it in the context of the sentence. Same thing like with acronyms like MRI, RAM, MP for megapixels. Explain in the context of the sentence, what those terms mean. And then the other one that you want to try to avoid using is what's called colloquial language or informal language. And if I ever tell you that, you can use it in speaking, but try to avoid it in writing, because if you say I'm sweating out a cold, or it's a crying shame that this situation happened, and you want to avoid that. The other that you need to be aware of in writing is what's called idioms, idiomatic writing. And it's language or phrases that we use in the United States that they may not understand in other countries. So, like, for example, if you say I'm surfing the net, that is not something that would be readily known maybe to somebody from another country. So you need to keep that in mind, as you write. And something else that I wanted to point out too is in your not in your handbook, but rather in your textbook, in Chapter 4, there's a really good chapter on pre-writing, how to focus on ideas and how to gather your ideas. Take a look at that because it gives you different brainstorming strategies. The last item that I wanted to get into this evening is on writing an essay. Now, when you write an essay, particularly like a narrative essay, you have to answer at least 5 or 6 questions. So, for example, if you have an incident about delivering a baby, how old were you? What was happening in your life at that time? Were you at school? Were you working? Were you married at the time? Do you have other children? Where were you living? What were the circumstances of your life overall? Those types of questions are very, very useful to make a person aware of. And the other point that I would just like to mention to you with that is state your thesis statement in the last 1 or 2 sentences. So it's your topic and your attitude about the topic. So that's the key point there. Then every one of the body paragraphs that you write has to be connected back to that thesis statement as much as possible in 1 or 2 sentences at the end of more of your paragraphs or most of your paragraphs. Connect to your thesis statement. Make a connection back to that. When you're done, when you get to the end of the document or the essay, you want to have a concluding paragraph. Don't introduce any new information. Connect back to the introduction. That's what's called parallel focus or parallel structure or parallelism. And then the other thing is you want to restate your thesis. Again, you don't want to introduce any new information. You're just reviewing. And so if you can master that, I think it's helpful. The skills that you learn in college writing really go into the next writing course that you take or other situations that you're going to run into in the course of your career. And believe me, these skills, your communication skills, your speaking, your writing skills, you use those every single day, and you have to be fairly sharp. You don't have to be the best, but you do have to be fairly sharp on how you speak and how you write and how you communicate overall, because as you progress up the ladder, that's basically one of the factors that determines if you're going to succeed or not. So anyhow, that's it, and I hope this video was helpful to you, and hopefully you have a good week. Thanks.